Bueno, pues buenas tardes. Qué felicidad ver a todas estas caras aquí con nosotros. La verdad que es un momento muy especial para nosotros por compartir con ustedes acá. De verdad que nos sobra agradecer muy especialmente a Cescul, a Rubén, a todo el equipo de trabajo que han hecho este evento posible. Tener a dos grandes del derecho norteamericano, como son la profesora Nirider y el profesor Drizin, es un privilegio aquí en Colombia. Realmente que ellos han vuelto los precursores y los líderes de un tópico tan importante para el sistema judicial como es el asunto de los interrogatorios policivos y de las confesiones falsas. Un tema que quizá hoy no está en la agenda principal de las discusiones jurídicas colombianas, pero que no le debemos dar por eso menor valor, al contrario, debemos empezar a ponerlo sobre la mesa y empezar a tener seriamente esta discusión. Los mismos problemas que ellos sufren, aquí los adolescentes, pero además es muy importante tenerlo en cuenta cuando uno toma en consideración que nuestro sistema sigue como modelo en algunas medidas el sistema americano. Y es importante entender que hay cosas buenas y malas, que hay cosas que ellos deben mejorar y hay cosas que nosotros debemos mejorar sin copiarlas a ellos o tomar sus experiencias. Yo creo que ese es el mejor aprendizaje. La forma en la que va a estar organizado este panel es que, por supuesto, lo que queremos es oírlos a ellos, que nos cuenten la historia, la experiencia que ellos tienen desde la academia sobre estos tópicos. Entonces, la primera hora les vamos a dar la palabra a los profesores para que ellos hagan una presentación sobre el tema de interrogatorios policiales, confesiones falsas, y nos expliquen un poco cómo, en el caso de Brandon Dassey, esto fue un eje central durante este caso y fue lo que llevó a que ellos terminaran involucrados en él. Después de esta explicación y después de que veamos incluso algunos videos que no se ven en la serie de Netflix que van a ser muy importantes para que ustedes vean cómo es que se produce una falsa acusación, vamos a iniciar una breve plática entre nosotros, para lo cual, por facilidad del público y de ellos mismos, pues vamos a intentar hacerla en inglés. Luego de antemano les pido excusas por mis quizás falencias en el inglés y de imprecisiones. Esto podrá ser en algunos puntos Spanish, entonces les pido que nos lo disfrutemos así. Sin dar más rodeos, quiero darle la palabra al profesor Drizin para que comience con su exposición sobre interrogatorios policiales y falsas confesiones. Profesor Drizin, please.
This is Brendan Dassey. Brendan Dassey is my client, and Laura and I have been representing Brendan Dassey since October of 2007, almost 12 years. Brendan's story began much earlier, however, in October of 2007. What we're going to do today is to tell the story of Brendan Dassey, a true story of a false confession. We are going to take you inside the interrogation room, and you will see some videos that were not in Making a Murderer, and some audio that was not in Making a Murderer, to give you a fuller picture of how the police officers broke Brendan Dassey down to a place of hopelessness where it became easy to manipulate him into giving a false confession. The story of Brendan Dassey's case actually begins before Brendan was born. And it begins in 1985 in a case that involved Brendan's uncle, Stephen Avery. In 1985, Stephen Avery was arrested and charged with the rape of a woman in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. On that day, this woman went out for a run along a beachfront along Lake Michigan. And as she was running, she saw a man. He was wearing disheveled clothes. He was scruffy and unshaven. And as she passed him on the run, she had a weird feeling about him. He said to her, "What a beautiful day for a run." And she said, "Yes," and kept going. But when she reached the halfway point of her run and turned around to go back to where her husband was waiting for her, she saw this man again. And this man positioned himself between her and where her husband was, many miles away, so the husband could not see him. She tried to avoid him. She ran into the water to escape him, but he pursued her there. And soon he abducted her and he dragged her into a wooded area and he raped her. Before he attacked her, she made sure to study the lines of his face, to try to memorize as best as she could every single detail of this man, so that she could identify him if she survived the ordeal. During the course of the ordeal, he strangled her, he beat her with a rock, he knocked her unconscious. He had his way with her, and then he left. She stumbled up after waking up onto the beach. She was naked, and other people on the beach ran up to her and threw a blanket around her. Soon her husband arrived, and then the process of the police investigation began. Now, the police in Manitowoc County had a number of people that they believed fit the description that this woman had given. And one of those men was a man named Stephen Avery. Stephen Avery was somebody who had been on the radar screen of law enforcement in Manitowoc County. He wasn't a hardcore criminal, but he had numerous run-ins with the police. And the description seemed to fit him. So the police officers created a lineup. And in that lineup, they put a number of men. And in that lineup was Stephen Avery. And as the victim looked at the lineup, she said, "I think it looks like him," and pointed to Stephen Avery. Now, at that point in time, the police officer should have said, "Are you sure?" But instead, he said, "That's the man we think did this to you." So her identification became fixed on Stephen Avery. And that was the only evidence against Stephen Avery when the case went to trial later that year. She came into court, she looked at him, she pointed him at his counsel's table, she identified him, she told the jury that she studied the lines of his face. She was rock solid in her identification of Stephen Avery. Stephen Avery had 16 witnesses come into court to testify that he was somewhere else at the time of the crime working. But those witnesses, those alibi witnesses, couldn't prevent him from being convicted. Her identification was so strong. Around the time of this assault, there was another man who was on the radar screen of law enforcement who had assaulted other women in the area where this assault occurred. And some of the people in the police department thought that maybe he was involved. But the Manitowoc police officers had their man, they got their information, and Stephen Avery went to prison. And he sat there for 18 years. And he sat there until a miracle happened. The miracle happened actually in 1989. In 1989, DNA evidence first began to be used in the United States. Stephen didn't learn about it for several years, and he wrote to a local innocence project, and they sought out the evidence in this case. And there was one single hair that was left that could be used for testing. All of the other evidence had been graded. And on that hair was a root. And they did a DNA test of that root. And lo and behold, it did not belong to Stephen Avery, but it belonged to a man named Gregory Allen, the very man that others in the police department thought might have committed the crime. This revelation opened the cell doors for Stephen Avery, and he left to great fanfare. He became a celebrity. Politicians wanted to take their picture with him. They named juvenile criminal justice task forces after him, and everybody wanted to study his case to see what went wrong and how we could prevent a wrongful conviction from happening in the future. Stephen Avery got some very good lawyers, and they filed a lawsuit against the police department that had convicted him. The irony here is that the woman who identified him, it's a woman that Laura and I have become friendly with. When she saw the photograph of the man who actually assaulted her, there was no recognition whatsoever. All she could see in her mind was Stephen Avery. Stephen filed a lawsuit and he sought damages in the amount of $36 million from the Manitowoc County law enforcement officers. $2 million for every year he had spent in prison. And the lawsuit was going well. And then, on October 31st, 2005, everything went south for Stephen Avery, and soon for our client, Brendan Dassey. Because on that day, a young photographer named Teresa Hallbach came to the Avery property to take pictures of a car that they had wanted to sell, and she disappeared. That was the last place she was known to have visited before her disappearance. And when police learned that Stephen Avery was on that property, they again focused all of their attention on Brendan Dassey's uncle. Over the next 8 days, they sealed off the property, and they collected evidence, and that evidence implicated Stephen Avery in her murder. What did they find? They found her blood in her car. They found her car on the property. It was hidden by some branches. They found the key to her car in Stephen Avery's trailer. They found his blood in her car. And they found the most gruesome discovery of all. They found her bones, or part of her bones, in a fire pit next to Stephen Avery's trailer, a place where Stephen had bonfires and frequently burned his trash. It was a powerful forensic case on paper, but they did not have a narrative of Teresa's last hours. And so, as the case was getting geared up for trial, they focused on Brendan Dassey. And over a period of 3 days, they interrogated Brendan 4 times without a parent, without an attorney present, and they got from him a series of confessions that you saw in Making Murder and that we're going to talk about today. I knew of Stephen Avery's case, I knew of Brendan Dassey's arrest, I knew he had been convicted, and in October 2007, my phone rang, and on the other end of the line were attorneys who I had worked with in Wisconsin asking me to represent Brendan Dassey on appeal. And at that time, I came into my classroom after watching the videotapes of the interrogation, and I turned to a student and I said, I want you to watch these tapes. And that student was Laura.